Think about the last time you opened Instagram, Facebook, or TikTok. Someone is posting their vacation. Someone is celebrating a birthday. Someone is showing their new relationship. And then, there are people who seem to exist online without ever actually showing themselves. They scroll, they watch, they might even like your posts. But when you visit their profile, nothing. No selfies, no life updates, no relationship announcements. Sometimes, they haven't posted anything in months or even years. And naturally, we start wondering, why? Are they shy? Are they insecure? Are they introverted? Do they simply not care what people think? Or is there something deeper happening psychologically? The interesting thing is that there isn't one psychological explanation. People can behave exactly the same way for completely different reasons, and that's what makes people who rarely post so interesting. Social media has changed the way we experience ordinary moments. A vacation can become a photo. A birthday becomes a story. A relationship becomes a relationship announcement. Even a quiet evening at home can become content. We're no longer just experiencing things. We're often deciding which parts of our lives are worth showing to other people. Psychologists call part of this self-presentation, the way we manage the image other people have of us. And research shows that people differ in how strongly they want to engage in online self-presentation. Social comparison and fear of missing out can also influence that desire. Springer, but some people simply don't find the process very rewarding. They don't think, I need people to know I was here. They think, I experienced it. That's enough. They don't necessarily dislike attention. They just don't believe every meaningful moment needs an audience. And that distinction is important. Imagine someone who gets married. They could post the wedding. They could upload 50 pictures. They could tell thousands of people exactly where they are, who they're with, and what they're doing. Or, they could simply enjoy the day and never post a single picture. For some people, their private life is something they deliberately keep private. Their relationships aren't public information. Their family isn't content. Their location isn't something strangers need to know. Their personal struggles aren't something they want discussed in a comment section. Research has found an association between greater privacy concerns and lower self-disclosure online. So when someone doesn't post, it may not mean they have nothing interesting happening. They may simply have decided that you don't need to see it. Here's where things become more psychologically interesting. Posting something online means opening yourself up to an audience. And once something is posted, you can't completely control how people interpret it. You might think a picture is funny. Someone else thinks it's embarrassing. You might think your relationship looks beautiful. Someone else judges it. You might share an opinion you genuinely believe. And suddenly, strangers, or people you barely know, have something to say about it. For some people, that constant awareness of being watched can make posting exhausting. They don't necessarily fear people. They simply don't enjoy the feeling of being evaluated. And there's a difference between being socially withdrawn and simply being selective about what you reveal. Someone can be extremely social in real life and almost completely invisible online. There's another psychological factor called social comparison. Human beings naturally compare themselves with other people, but social media gives us an almost endless supply of people to compare ourselves with. Someone is richer, someone is prettier, someone is traveling, someone just bought a house, someone is getting married, someone seems to have the perfect body. The problem is that we're usually comparing our ordinary reality with someone else's carefully selected highlights. Research on social media self-presentation has examined how social comparison can influence the way people present themselves online. And some people eventually become tired of the entire cycle. They don't want to compete. They don't want to prove anything. They don't want to constantly wonder whether their life looks impressive enough. So they step back, not necessarily because they hate social media, but because they don't want their self-worth tied to what happens on it. There's something else you might notice about people who rarely post. They sometimes seem more interested in experiencing a moment than documenting it. Imagine going to a beautiful beach. One person immediately takes 30 pictures, changes the angle, edits them, chooses the best one, writes a caption, checks who viewed it. Another person simply sits there and watches the ocean. Neither person is necessarily doing anything wrong. They're simply interacting with the experience differently. For the second person, the moment doesn't become more meaningful because someone else knows about it. The memory can remain completely private, and that's an important psychological distinction. Some people don't need documentation to validate an experience. This is where a lot of psychology content online gets things wrong. You'll often hear, people who don't post are more confident, or people who never post don't need validation, or even, people who don't use social media are psychologically superior. That's too simplistic. Not posting can come from many different motivations. Someone might genuinely value privacy. Someone else might be afraid of criticism. Someone might feel uncomfortable with their appearance. Someone might worry about being judged. Someone might have had a bad experience online. And another person might simply not care about posting. The behavior is the same. The psychology behind it can be completely different. Research on online self-presentation also shows that personality and individual differences matter, rather than there being one universal explanation for how people present themselves online. So we shouldn't diagnose someone's personality simply because their profile is empty. There's another type of person you may recognize. They know what's happening online. They know who's dating whom. They see the trends. They watch people's stories. They may even spend quite a bit of time on social media, but they rarely contribute. They're observers. They consume more than they produce. And this is fascinating because it challenges the idea that social media participation means constantly posting. You can be socially connected without constantly broadcasting yourself. You can know what's happening without making yourself part of the display. For some people, watching is simply more comfortable than being watched. This might actually be the simplest explanation. Some people don't have a deep psychological reason. They just don't think, I should post this. They see other people posting their breakfast and think, okay. They see someone announcing their relationship and think, good for them. They take a picture and think, I'll keep this for myself. And that's it. Not every behavior needs a hidden trauma. Not every quiet person is secretly insecure. Not every private person is an introvert. Sometimes, a person simply has different priorities. But here's the most interesting part. In a culture where visibility is increasingly treated as social currency, choosing not to be visible can itself become a form of independence. Because every time you post something, you're giving people a little piece of information about yourself. And once it's public, you no longer have complete control over what people do with that information. People can interpret it, judge it, save it, share it, compare themselves with it, or simply misunderstand it. So some people make a conscious decision. Not everything about me needs to be public. And perhaps that's the real psychology behind some people who never post. Not that they have nothing to say, but that they have learned that silence can also be a choice. So the next time you see someone whose social media profile looks completely empty, don't immediately assume they're shy. Don't assume they're lonely. Don't assume they're insecure. And don't assume they're secretly more confident than everyone else either. Their silence could come from privacy, self-consciousness, indifference, personal preference, a dislike of social comparison, or simply a belief that their life doesn't need to be documented for it to matter. Because at the end of the day, some people want to be seen, some people want to be understood, and some people are perfectly comfortable simply living their lives without an audience. And in a world where almost everything can become content, choosing what stays private might be one of the most personal choices you can make. But what about you? Do you post everything about your life online, or do you prefer to keep most things private? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoy exploring the psychology behind everyday human behavior, subscribe to the channel. There's a lot more about the human mind we're going to uncover. Until next time, keep observing, keep questioning, and keep wondering why we are the way we are.